The sharp sound of the slap echoing across my daughter's cheek was the exact moment something died inside me. It wasn't just the maternal love, nor the hope, nor the patience. It was the last excuse I had left to keep calling a place that was never a home, family. In that second, as my daughter looked at me with eyes full of confusion and pain, I knew everything was going to change. And I also knew my mother would never again have control over my life. My name is Elena Vargas. I am 38 years old. I am an architect and founder of a successful real estate investment firm that many consider an example of achievement. I am married to a good man, Daniel, and we have a 7-year-old daughter named Clara, who is, without exaggeration, the light that keeps my world in balance. From the outside, my life seems orderly, stable, even enviable. But every Sunday that image cracked for one single reason: the family meal at my mother's penthouse. The call came one Sunday at exactly 3 p.m. with the cruel precision of a Swiss clock. On my phone screen appeared the photo of my mother, Beatrice, smiling with a warmth that had never existed in her gaze. I knew, even before answering, that it was not an invitation. It was an order. "Elena, daughter," she said with that voice both sweet and sharp at the same time. "You're already on your way, right? Your sister Valeria and my little princess are already here. We're about to start with the appetizers. Regina, my niece, the perfect granddaughter, the jewel of the crown, the girl around whom my mother's entire emotional universe revolved." "Yes, Mom, we're leaving now," I lied. In reality, we were still in our pajamas. Daniel was reading on the sofa and Clara was drawing peacefully on the floor, enjoying one of those rare afternoons without commitments or tensions. I hung up the phone and let out a long, heavy sigh, as if I were already tired before it even began. Daniel looked up. He didn't need to hear the conversation. He knew that gesture in my shoulders, that stiffness that only appeared after talking to her. "We don't have to go," he said calmly. "We can say Clara isn't feeling well or that you have urgent work." I looked at my daughter. She was focused, with her tongue slightly poking out between her lips while coloring. I wanted to stay. I wanted to protect that moment. But the invisible chains of duty were still there, tightening my chest as they had done throughout my life. "I have to go," I replied. "She's my mother." Daniel didn't insist. He knew this battle was neither new nor easy. It was the constant struggle between the woman I had become and the little girl who still waited in some corner for a bit of maternal approval. When I told Clara we were going to Grandma's house, her smile faded a little. "Again?" she asked. "Grandma Beatrice doesn't let me draw in her living room. She says I ruin the cushions." I kissed her forehead, feeling a pang of guilt. "It will only be for a little while, sweetheart. Then we'll buy pistachio ice cream." Yes, it was a bribe. I knew it and I hated myself a little for needing it. While getting dressed, I chose each garment carefully. Not too elegant so I wouldn't seem arrogant, nor too simple so I wouldn't give my mother ammunition for her criticisms. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw two women reflected. The confident architect capable of closing million-dollar deals, and the daughter who, almost 40 years old, still felt anxiety before seeing her own mother. The family meal was never about union. It was a performance, a weekly theater play. Beatrice was the director and the protagonist. Valeria, the adored daughter. I, the secondary character, useful only to highlight the shine of the others. And that Sunday, without knowing it, I was heading to the final act. The car ride to the exclusive neighborhood where my mother lived always took me back to the past. The modern buildings mixed with memories I preferred to forget. One of them returned with force. My 15th birthday, or rather, the party that never happened. I dreamed of something simple. A cake, lights, school friends. Nothing extravagant. My father, Don Javier Castillo, had saved for it. He showed it to me proudly. But a week before, my mother sat me in the kitchen with that expression of sacrifice she mastered so well. "Your sister is going through a difficult time," she said. Valeria was always going through a difficult time. She was invited to an important party. She has nothing to wear. She feels terrible. I knew what was coming before she said it. "I've seen a beautiful bag for her. Very expensive, yes, but it would make her feel special." "Your party is childish, don't you think? We could use that money for something more useful." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I had already learned that resisting only prolonged the pain. That night I cried until I fell asleep. My father entered silently and sat beside me. He gave me a small silver compass. "So you always find your north," he said. "Don't depend on anyone, not even your mother." That memory accompanied me now as I parked the car in front of my mother's building. Without knowing it yet, that compass was going to point the way again. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Beatrice appeared smiling, impeccable. But her gaze passed over us and focused on Regina, who had just arrived with Valeria. My queen, she exclaimed, covering her with kisses. We were invisible. Hello, Mom, I said finally. Ah, yes, come in, she replied, as if greeting a stranger. Clara clung to me. She had already learned the rules of that place. And as we entered that penthouse full of luxury and coldness, I knew something was about to break. I still didn't know what, but I felt it in every step. And so began the day that would change our lives forever. Entering my mother's penthouse always had the same effect on me. It was like crossing an invisible border where my achievements, my adult life, and my authority as a mother were suspended in the air. That place was not a home. It was a showcase. Everything shone, everything was expensive, everything was perfectly placed to be seen, but nothing conveyed warmth, not even the family. Beatrice moved through the living room with theatrical energy, showing off every detail, every new object, as if they were extensions of her own worth. Valeria followed her closely, nodding, smiling, reinforcing that choreography they had perfected over the years. Regina ran from one side to the other, absolute owner of the space. Clara, on the other hand, walked slowly, observing, measuring every step so as not to break a rule that no one had bothered to explain. Be careful not to touch the walls, Clara, said my mother without looking at her. They've just been painted. My daughter nodded in silence. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, the same as always. Daniel greeted politely. I did the same. No one asked how we were. No one showed interest in Clara. Everything revolved, as always, around Regina. When the time for appetizers came, Beatrice appeared with an impeccable tray and a rehearsed smile. I've prepared what my little princess likes, she announced. You know, Valeria, we have to take care of her diet. A dancer needs quality energy. Dancer. That word was pronounced in that house as if it were a noble title. Regina, barely 8 years old, was already treated like a star in training. Special courses, designer clothes, constant praise. Everything was designed to reinforce one very clear idea. She was special and the rest of us were only there to confirm it. Clara sat at the table with her drawing notebook. She carried it everywhere. It was her refuge, her way of feeling safe in spaces where she wasn't. Can I draw a little, Mommy? She asked in a low voice. Before I could answer, my mother intervened. Not here, darling. The pencils might stain the table. Better go to the playroom with Regina. The playroom was a completely different universe. Latest generation tablets, electronic toys, everything thought for Regina. My daughter, with her colored pencils, seemed out of place even before entering. It's okay, Clara whispered. I watched her walk away with a mixture of resignation and bravery that broke my soul. That was not the attitude of a 7-year-old girl. It was the attitude of someone who had already learned that complaining was useless. The dessert arrived like a small spectacle. Beatrice placed the cake in the center of the table with exaggerated care. My queen's favorite, she sang. She cut the first slice. Large, perfect, with the best part of the cake. Regina clapped excitedly. Clara watched from her chair. I knew that was also her favorite dessert. My mother knew it too. But it didn't matter. When it was my daughter's turn, she received the smallest piece, the one from the edge, slightly squashed. Clara said nothing, lowered her gaze and began to eat in silence. I felt a pressure in my chest. A contained anger that had been building for years. It was then that something apparently small happened, something that in another house would have been insignificant. Clara took out her notebook and started drawing at the table. She was drawing Daniel. His concentrated face, his small smile. Everything spoke of love and pride. Daniel looked at her emotionally. Regina approached with her already empty plate. What is that? She asked with disdain. It's my dad. Clara replied without looking up. He looks like a monster, said Regina. Mine is more handsome. Before Clara could react, Regina took a glass of water, and with a clumsy but clearly deliberate movement, spilled it over the drawing. The paper got soaked, the pencil ran. Daniel's face dissolved into a gray stain. No, Clara cried. You did it on purpose. I stood up immediately. Regina, that is not done. Apologize to your cousin. Valeria reacted first, hugging her daughter. It was an accident, she said. Don't exaggerate, Elena. And then my mother spoke. Her voice firm. Cutting. Definitive. Please, always dramatizing. They're just girls. Clara is too sensitive, just like you. I felt something tighten inside me. Daniel also stood up. With all due respect, Beatrice, it was intentional. We saw it. She looked at him as if he were invisible. You stay out of it. In this family we don't raise crybaby girls. The word family echoed in my head like a mockery. What kind of family was that where a girl learned that her feelings didn't matter? I hugged Clara. I whispered that at home we would make another drawing. An even more beautiful one. She rested her head on my shoulder, trying to be strong. I, on the other hand, felt small, weak, guilty. The conversation continued as if nothing had happened. Expensive steaks. Praises for Regina. Future plans. Beatrice announced with pride that her granddaughter had been accepted into a prestigious ballet school. She will travel the world, she said, she will be famous. Then, as if it were an afterthought, she looked at Clara. And you still with your little drawings? I took a deep breath. The art teacher says Clara has a lot of talent. We're thinking of enrolling her in a special course. My mother put down her cutlery with a sharp blow. Art doesn't put food on the table. Don't fill the girl's head with fantasies. What she needs is discipline and a good future. Being happy is also a future. I responded. Feeling my voice begin to harden, Beatrice let out a cold laugh. We'll see who is right. Clara asked permission to go to the playroom. No one objected. Regina followed her. I didn't know that simple gesture was going to be the beginning of the darkest moment of my life. From the table we heard raised voices, a struggle, then a scream. She pushed me. Regina cried. Clara hit me. We ran to the living room. Regina was on the floor without a single mark, crying with a drama that would have made any spectator cry. Clara stood there, pale, trembling. It wasn't like that, said my daughter. She took my notebook. Beatrice didn't listen. Her face transformed. She walked toward Clara with firm steps full of anger. Silence! She roared. I saw her hand rise. I felt the world slow down. I wanted to scream. I wanted to move. But I didn't get there in time. The sound was dry, cruel, definitive. My mother's hand struck my daughter's cheek, and in that instant everything changed. The sound of the slap hung in the air as if time had stopped just to force us to hear it again and again. It wasn't a hard blow, but it was enough to break something that had been cracking inside me for years. Clara brought her hand to her cheek. Her eyes, big and moist, searched for me in silence. She didn't cry immediately. First came the confusion, then the fear, and finally that silent question no child should ever ask. Why did they do this to me? I felt like I couldn't breathe. For a second I was an adult woman, neither a businesswoman nor a strong mother. I was a little girl again, standing in front of that same woman, feeling small, powerless, invisible. But something was different. This time it wasn't me. It was my daughter. And that changed everything. She will learn to respect this way, said my mother coldly. I will not allow a spoiled girl to hurt my granddaughter. Daniel took a step forward, his voice trembling with contained anger. You just struck my daughter. And I would do it again, Beatrice replied. Someone has to educate her, since you clearly don't know how. I didn't hear anything else. The noise of blood pounding in my ears covered everything. I knelt in front of Clara and hugged her carefully, as if she were made of glass. I kissed her reddened cheek. Let's go home, I whispered. She nodded, clinging to my neck. In that instant I felt in the pocket of my coat the familiar cold of metal. My father's silver compass. Find your north. And I found it. Clara was my north. Clara had always been it. I stood up with her in my arms. I looked at my mother. For the first time I didn't see authority. I didn't see power. I saw a woman who had crossed an irreversible line. Where do you think you're going? She shouted. This isn't over. I didn't respond. Walking toward the door was like leaving an entire life behind. Each step was a silent farewell. Daniel walked beside me. Firm, protective. If you walk out that door, Beatrice threatened, don't come back. You will be left without family. The elevator doors closed in front of her distorted face. Inside, the silence was absolute. Clara began to cry quietly. Daniel held my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said. I didn't feel relief, I felt determination. In the parking lot I secured Clara in her seat. Then I stayed still with the phone in my hand. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number of lawyer Serrano, my father's attorney, the only one who knew the whole truth. Elena, he answered. Is everything all right? No, I said, but it will be. I want to activate the revocation clause of my mother's trust. There was a long silence on the other end. Understood. Your father made it clear that this decision was yours alone. I will proceed. I hung up. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. The strange calm that comes when there is no turning back. 2 days later the phone rang. It was my mother. The cards don't work, she said hysterically. This must be a mistake. Fix it right now. It's not a mistake, I replied. I canceled the trust. The silence was deafening. You can't do that, she shouted. That money is mine. That money was a concession, I said. And you lost it when you struck my daughter. I hung up. I knew what was coming. War, manipulation, threats. but I was already prepared. The meeting with lawyer Serrano took place the next day. My mother and Valeria arrived confident they would regain control. They didn't know the truth was about to crush them. The trust was revocable, explained Serrano. And your daughter had total authority. Don Javier would never have done that, my mother shouted. I slid a folder across the table. Everything you have, I said. The penthouse. The money. The cards. Everything came from my company. The company that Dad left only to me. Valeria turned pale. That's not true. Yes, it is, I replied. And besides, Mom, the penthouse is company property. Technically you were living in my house. My mother's world collapsed in that instant, but the worst was still to come. Valeria burst into tears. Dad left a letter, she confessed. It explained everything. It said you were the pillar, that we should support you. What did you do with it? I asked. We burned it. The silence was absolute. Then Serrano took out a yellowish envelope. Don Javier foresaw this, he said. He left me a notarized copy. He read the letter. Every word was a validation, every phrase a closure. My father had seen me. He had chosen me. I stood up. You have 30 days to leave the penthouse, I told my mother, and you will never see my daughter again. I left without looking back. The war had ended and I had won something much more valuable than money. I had protected my daughter. The days after that meeting were not calm. They were silent. And that silence, far from being peace, was the loudest noise I had ever heard in my life. For years I had lived surrounded by constant tension, veiled reproaches, judgments disguised as concern. Suddenly, all of that disappeared. There were no calls, no messages, no reproaches, only emptiness. And for the first time, it didn't scare me. My mother didn't take long to react. When she understood that the money wouldn't return, that the cards would remain blocked and that the penthouse no longer belonged to her, she tried her last resort, pity. Messages from distant relatives began to arrive. Aunts, cousins, people who hadn't been present when my daughter cried with her burning cheek. Your mother is very ill. She doesn't eat, she cries all day. How can you be so hard? At first I tried to explain once, twice, until I understood something fundamental. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to give in. They wanted me to return to my usual place, the daughter who endures to keep up appearances. So I changed strategy. To every call I responded the same, calmly, without raising my voice. She struck my 7-year-old daughter. For me, the conversation ends there. Some hung up uncomfortably, others insisted, but little by little the calls stopped. Because there is no argument that can justify that. None. 30 days later, a moving truck stopped in front of the building in Polanco. I watched from the car as they took out boxes, furniture, expensive paintings that no longer seemed so important. My mother left the building with a tense face, without looking at me. Valeria walked behind in silence. They moved to a modest apartment in another part of the city. It wasn't misery. It was reality. For the first time in their lives, I didn't feel satisfaction, nor guilt. I felt something new. Lightness. Clara took weeks to sleep again without startles. Some nights she woke up crying. Others she asked me in a small voice if she had done something wrong. Every time that happened, I sat beside her, looked her in the eyes and repeated with absolute certainty. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Ever. We enrolled her in art classes. Her teacher told us something I will never forget. This girl doesn't just draw, she tells stories. And I understood that was exactly what she was doing. Telling the story she had lived, but now in a safe environment, without fear, without comparisons, without favoritism. My relationship with Daniel also changed. It became deeper, more honest. One night, while we were having a quiet dinner at home, he looked at me and said something that stayed with me. I had never seen you so present. He was right. I was no longer divided between the past and the present. I was no longer the daughter trying to please. I was a mother protecting. Months later I received a call. It was my mother. Her voice sounded different, more fragile, smaller. I miss you, she said. I've thought a lot. I'm sorry. I waited. I didn't respond right away. I'm sorry for what I did. I declare it all. I know, I said. But an apology doesn't repair the damage. Can I see her? Can I see my granddaughter? There was the real question and also the answer. I didn't respond with softness. I will make sure you don't lack the basics to live, but the privilege of being in my daughter's life, you lost it, and that decision is final. I hung up without anger, without shouts, without tears. Some doors, once closed, must remain that way to protect what is inside. 2 years have passed since that Sunday. 2 years of quiet Sundays, of drawings stuck on the refrigerator, of laughter without tension, of a home where no one walks in fear. My mother is still alive, my sister still exists. I didn't destroy them. I simply took away the power they used to harm. I learned something I want you to remember if you are listening to this story. Family is not a blind obligation. It is not a sentence. Family is a space where safety, respect, and love must exist. When that doesn't exist, walking away is not betrayal. It is survival. I chose my daughter, and that was the best decision of my life. Thank you for listening to today's story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next story.